The rain fell like shattered glass against my skin, each droplet a cold reminder of how thoroughly my life had collapsed. My thin jacket, already soaked through, did nothing to shield my body from the November chill. But it wasn't my own discomfort that brought tears streaming down my face, mixing with the rainwater. It was the sound of my 6-month-old daughter Emma whimpering against my chest, despite my desperate attempts to keep her dry beneath the small awning of the closed pharmacy. "Shh, baby girl. Everything's going to be okay," I whispered, knowing it was a lie. Nothing was okay. Not since Ryan had emptied our shared account 3 days ago, disappearing with every penny we had saved. Not since the landlord had changed the locks this morning after months of Ryan's broken promises about the overdue rent. Not since I discovered that my boyfriend, my daughter's father, had been gambling away our future for months. I'd spent the last 8 hours wandering the streets of Boston, carrying everything we had left in a single backpack. Some diapers, a change of clothes for Emma, her favorite stuffed rabbit, and my now useless nursing certificate. The women's shelter had been full. My only friend in the city was visiting her parents in Ohio, and my own parents, well, they had made it clear when I got pregnant that I was on my own. So here I stood, 23 years old, clutching my daughter to my chest, both of us soaked and shivering as night fell and the temperature dropped. Emma's crying grew louder, more desperate, and something inside me finally broke. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry," I sobbed, sliding down against the wall until I sat on the wet concrete, cradling my daughter as we both cried in the rain. The few pedestrians hurrying by with umbrellas averted their eyes. In this wealthy downtown district, we were an inconvenience, a reminder of failure they'd rather not acknowledge. I don't know how long I sat there, my body curled around Emma's tiny form, when the rain suddenly stopped hitting us. At least, that's what I thought until I looked up and saw that the rain hadn't stopped at all. It was being blocked by an umbrella, a large black umbrella held by a gloved hand. My eyes followed the hand to an arm, encased in what had to be an expensive suit, though in the dim light, I could only make out its dark color and perfect fit. The man holding the umbrella stood perfectly still, his face in shadow. Behind him, a sleek black car idled at the curb, its headlights cutting through the rain. Another man, broad-shouldered and vigilant, stood beside the car, his eyes constantly scanning the street. "You shouldn't be out here," the man with the umbrella said, his voice low and smooth, with the faintest hint of an accent I couldn't place. Italian, perhaps? It wasn't a question or an expression of concern. It was a statement, delivered with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I clutched Emma tighter. "I'm fine," I managed, the words catching in my throat. "We're just waiting for someone." Another lie. He shifted slightly, and the light from the pharmacy sign caught his face. My breath hitched. He was older than me, mid-30s maybe, with sharp features that seemed carved from marble, dark hair, slightly damp at the temples despite the umbrella, a strong jawline shadowed with perfect stubble. But it was his eyes that held me captive, dark as midnight and just as fathomless, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Your baby is cold," he stated, his gaze dropping to Emma, who had momentarily quieted at the sound of his voice. "And you're soaked through." Before I could respond, he turned slightly and nodded to the man by the car, who immediately opened the back door. Then he looked back at me, extending his free hand, a clear invitation. "No, thank you," I said quickly, alarm bells ringing in my head. Get into a strange man's car? No matter how expensive his watch or how commanding his presence, I wasn't that desperate, was I? As if in answer, Emma began to cry again, a pitiful sound that tore at my heart. The man didn't move, his hand still extended, his expression unreadable. "I have a warm car and access to dry clothes," he said simply, "for both of you." "I don't even know you," I protested weakly. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement. "Alessio Moretti." He said it as if the name should mean something to me. When I didn't react, something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps. Then he added, "And you are?" "Lily," I answered, unsure why I was even engaging in this conversation. "Lily Bennett." "Well, Lily Bennett," he said, my name rolling off his tongue like he was tasting it. I'm offering you and your child shelter from the rain. Nothing more. He paused, his eyes moving over my face. Unless there's someone else coming for you? The question hung in the air between us, highlighting the truth we both knew. There was no one coming for me, no one who cared if Emma and I spent the night in the rain. A gust of wind sent a spray of rainwater against us, and Emma let out another cry. I looked down at her red, tear-streaked face, then back up at the man, Alessio, who stood patiently waiting, seemingly indifferent to whether I accepted his offer. I made my decision in that moment, driven by desperation and a mother's instinct to protect her child, even if it meant taking a risk. Just to get dry, I clarified, struggling to my feet with Emma in my arms. Something changed in Alessio's expression. A slight narrowing of his eyes, a subtle tension around his mouth, like he'd won something but was careful not to show satisfaction. Of course, he agreed smoothly, stepping aside to let me pass but keeping the umbrella over us. As we walked the few steps to the car, I felt his free hand come to rest lightly on the small of my back, warm and proprietary through my wet jacket. I told myself it was just to guide me, but there was something in that touch, something that sent a current up my spine and raised goosebumps on my arms that had nothing to do with the cold. The man by the car, clearly some kind of bodyguard, opened the door wider as we approached. Up close, I could see the bulge of a weapon beneath his jacket, and my step faltered. "Is everything okay, Mr. Moretti?" the bodyguard asked, his eyes never settling on me directly, addressing his boss with practiced deference. "Everything is fine, Marco," Alessio replied, guiding me forward again with that light but insistent touch. "Ms. Bennett and her child will be joining us." Marco nodded once, his face expressionless, and stepped aside. The interior of the car was warm and smelled of expensive leather. I hesitated at the open door, suddenly aware of how wet and bedraggled I must look, clutching my backpack and my crying baby. "I'll ruin the seats," I murmured, a last feeble resistance. Alessio Moretti leaned in close then, his breath warm against my ear. "I can afford new ones," he said softly, the words carrying a weight that made my heart beat faster. Then he added, with a note that bordered on command, "Get in, Lily." I did. The door closed behind me with a soft thud that felt strangely final. Alessio walked around to the other side and slid in beside me, folding his umbrella with practiced ease. Up close in the car's dim interior lighting, I could see more details of his face, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the perfect straightness of his nose, the fullness of his lower lip that contrasted with the hardness in his gaze. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as Marco got behind the wheel and pulled away from the curb. "Somewhere safe," Alessio replied, his attention now on Emma, who had begun to quiet down in the warmth of the car. "Your daughter is beautiful." It wasn't said as a compliment, but as another statement of fact. "How old?" 6 months, I answered automatically, then wondered why I was giving this stranger information about my child. Yet somehow, in the warmth of the car with the rain pattering against the windows, the situation felt less threatening than it should have. "And her father?" Alessio asked, his tone casual, but I didn't miss the sharpening of his gaze. The question hit like a punch to the gut. "Not in the picture," I said tersely, looking away. A short silence followed. Then, "I see." Those 2 simple words contained a multitude of meanings I couldn't begin to decipher. When I glanced back, Alessio was watching me with an expression that made me shiver despite the car's warmth, something calculating and possessive all at once. "You're afraid?" he observed. Again, not a question. "I'm not—" "Don't lie to me, Lily," he interrupted, his voice soft but with an edge that made my protest die in my throat. "Not ever. Fear is natural, smart even, but unnecessary. Not with me." The car turned onto a street lined with high-end boutiques, all closed at this hour, their windows glowing softly in the rainy night. We were heading deeper into the wealthy part of the city, away from anywhere I'd normally go. "I don't even know you," I repeated, my earlier words now laden with the full weight of my situation. I was in a car with a complete stranger, driving to an unknown destination, with my baby in my arms. Alessio studied me for a long moment, then reached into his suit jacket and withdrew a phone. One of 3, I noticed, each in a different pocket. He pressed a button and spoke briefly in what sounded like Italian before hanging up. "There will be food waiting," he said, putting the phone away. "And dry clothes, for both of you." I should have been grateful, but instead a chill ran down my spine. The casual display of wealth and power, the expectation of immediate service, the way he'd simply decided what would happen next. It all spoke of a man accustomed to absolute control. "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since he'd first extended his hand to me. His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. "Because I wanted to," he said simply. The car slowed and turned into an underground parking garage beneath what looked like a luxury high-rise. As we descended into the fluorescent-lit concrete structure, I felt like I was sinking into another world, one with its own rules and dangers. Emma stirred against me, her little body warm and trusting, unaware of the precipice we balanced on. The car stopped near a private elevator, and Marco quickly got out to open Alessio's door. As Alessio stepped out, he turned back to me, extending his hand once more. "Welcome to my home, Lily Bennett," he said, his gaze traveling over my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I think you'll find it preferable to the rain." I looked at his outstretched hand, then at my daughter's peaceful face, now sleeping against my chest. In that moment, I made the second decision that would irrevocably alter the course of our lives. I placed my hand in his and stepped out of the car. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and a small smile curved his lips, not quite reaching his eyes. It was the smile of a predator who had successfully lured his prey exactly where he wanted them. And the most terrifying part, some small, desperate corner of my soul didn't mind being caught. The elevator ride was silent, except for the soft hum of machinery as we ascended. Alessio stood beside me, not touching but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the subtle notes of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that reminded me of cedar and amber. Emma slept against my chest, her breathing finally steady after her earlier distress. "Penthouse," Marco announced unnecessarily, as the elevator doors opened directly into a vast living space. I couldn't stop the small gasp that escaped me. The apartment was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the rainy Boston skyline like a living painting, the city lights blurred and beautiful through the water-streaked glass. The space itself was minimalist, but luxurious. Dark hardwood floors, sleek furniture in shades of charcoal and cream, and artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime, if I ever worked again. "This way," Alessio said, placing his hand on the small of my back again, that same proprietary touch guiding me forward. We passed through the living area into a hallway lined with closed doors. He opened one to reveal a spacious guest bedroom with an adjoining bathroom. Like the rest of the apartment, it was elegantly appointed but impersonal, beautiful but lacking warmth. "You'll find everything you need in here," he said, stepping aside to let me enter. "There are clothes in the closet. They should fit. When you're ready, come back to the living room. Food will be waiting." "How do you have women's clothes just available?" I asked, suspicion creeping into my voice. Something flickered across his face. Amusement, perhaps. "I own several businesses, including a clothing line, sample sizes." His eyes met mine. "Nothing previously worn, if that's your concern." Before I could respond, a soft knock sounded at the main entrance of the penthouse. Alessio glanced at his watch. "That will be the food, and something for your daughter." With that, he turned and left, closing the bedroom door behind him. Alone for the first time since our encounter, I let out a shaky breath and surveyed my surroundings. The bed was large and looked impossibly comfortable, covered in plush white bedding. A modern crib had somehow already been set up in the corner. When had he arranged that? During our brief car ride, I laid Emma gently on the center of the bed, surrounding her with pillows to prevent her from rolling off, though she was still too young for that to be a real concern. She stirred but didn't wake, her tiny fists curled beside her face. Looking at her peaceful expression, I felt a surge of both love and fear. What had I done, bringing her into a stranger's home? Yet what choice did I have? The bathroom was as luxurious as I'd expected. Marble countertops, a glass-enclosed shower large enough for 3 people, and a deep soaking tub. Fluffy white towels were stacked neatly on a warming rack. On the counter sat an array of high-end toiletries, still sealed, alongside a hairdryer and other essentials. I caught sight of myself in the mirror and winced. My dark blonde hair hung in wet strands around my pale face. Dark circles shadowed my blue eyes, and my clothes clung to my thin frame, still dripping onto the expensive floor. No wonder Alessio had looked at me with such intensity. I was a mess. A charity case. The shower called to me like a siren song. I left the bathroom door open to hear Emma if she woke and stripped off my wet clothes, letting them fall in a sodden heap on the floor. The hot water was blissful, washing away the chill that had seemed to sink into my bones. I used the shampoo and body wash, their unfamiliar scents enveloping me in luxury. Clean and wrapped in a towel, I returned to the bedroom to find a set of clothes laid out on a chair that hadn't been there before. Silk pajamas, underwear with the tags still attached, and a plush robe. All in my size, as promised. The thought that someone had entered while I showered, while Emma slept, sent a shiver down my spine. I dressed quickly, then attended to Emma. She woke as I changed her into a clean diaper from my backpack and fussed a little, hungry and disoriented in the strange surroundings. "I know, sweetie," I murmured, lifting her into my arms. "This is weird for me too." The closet yielded more clothes. Casual wear, dresses, even shoes in what appeared to be my size. The precision of it all was unnerving. Had he guessed? Or was there more to Alessio Moretti's interest in us than a random act of charity? With Emma in my arms and my hair still damp but combed, I finally left the bedroom, following the hallway back to the main living area. Alessio was there, his suit jacket removed, the sleeves of his crisp white shirt rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He stood by the windows, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, watching the rain lash against the glass. He turned at my approach, his eyes taking in the sight of me in the clothes he'd provided. "Better," he said simply, that single word somehow both approval and assessment. The dining table was set for one, with covered dishes emitting tantalizing aromas. Beside it, a high chair had appeared, new by the looks of it, with a small container of what looked like baby food and a bottle. "You thought of everything," I said, unable to keep the note of suspicion from my voice. "I try to," he replied, setting his glass down and approaching us. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward Emma. I hesitated, instinctively tightening my hold on my daughter. "I won't harm her, Lily," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I simply thought you might prefer to eat with both hands free." After a moment I nodded, allowing him to take Emma. To my surprise, he handled her with practiced ease, supporting her head properly and speaking to her in soft Italian as he settled her into the high chair. "You have children?" I asked, taking the seat at the table. "No," he answered, securing Emma's straps with deft fingers. "But I have nieces and nephews." He checked the temperature of the bottle on his wrist, another surprisingly domestic gesture from this enigmatic man, before handing it to me. "It's formula," he explained. "The highest quality available, unless you're breastfeeding?" "I was," I admitted, taking the bottle. But with everything, I trailed off, not wanting to delve into the stresses of the past few days that had affected my milk supply. Alessio nodded, understanding without requiring further explanation. He took the seat across from me, watching as I began to feed Emma the bottle, which she accepted eagerly. "Eat," he instructed, nodding toward my plate. "The food will get cold." I removed the covers to find an exquisitely prepared meal, pasta with a light cream sauce, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread. Despite everything, my stomach growled audibly. I hadn't eaten since the stale bagel I'd managed to get this morning. As I ate with one hand while holding Emma's bottle with the other, Alessio studied us with that same unreadable intensity. "Why were you on the street, Lily?" he finally asked. I swallowed hard, embarrassment heating my cheeks. "We were evicted," I said simply, not wanting to elaborate on Ryan's betrayal or my own naivety. "The baby's father?" I looked down at my plate, left, took our savings. Alessio was silent for a moment. When I glanced up, his expression had hardened, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "His name?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. "Why does it matter?" I countered, suddenly uneasy. "Curiosity," he replied, but there was something dangerous lurking behind the word. I decided to change the subject. "What do you do, Mr. Moretti, that allows you to rescue strangers and bring them to penthouses?" A small smile curved his lips. "Alessio, please." He took a sip of his drink. "I have various business interests. Import-export, real estate, as I mentioned, a clothing line." It was vague enough to mean anything, and something in his demeanor discouraged further questioning. Instead, I focused on finishing my meal and tending to Emma, who had drained the bottle and was now contentedly looking around the unfamiliar space. "You're a good mother," Alessio observed, watching as I gently burped Emma against my shoulder. The simple compliment brought unexpected tears to my eyes. After days of feeling like a complete failure, unable to provide even basic shelter for my child, the words hit a raw nerve. "I'm trying," I managed, blinking back the moisture. "And her father is a fool," he added, his tone hardening again. "To abandon his responsibilities, his family." The way he said family, with such reverence and intensity, caught my attention. There was history there, deeply held values that seemed at odds with the cold, controlled exterior he presented. Emma yawned against my shoulder, her eyes growing heavy again. It had been a long, traumatic day for both of us. "You should rest," Alessio said, noting my daughter's drowsiness and my own exhaustion. "Tomorrow, we can discuss your situation further." "Tomorrow?" I echoed, suddenly remembering that this was supposed to be just a temporary reprieve from the rain. "I don't want to impose." "You're not," he cut in, his tone brooking no argument. "You and Emma will stay here, where it's safe and warm." His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. "Unless you have somewhere else to go?" The challenge was clear. We both knew I had nowhere, no one. "Thank you," I said finally, the words inadequate for the magnitude of what he was offering, yet all I had to give. Alessio nodded once, then stood. "I have work to do. Make yourself comfortable. Consider this your home for as long as necessary." As he turned to leave, a question burst from me. "Why me? Why help us?" He paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Some things are meant to be, Lily Bennett," he said cryptically. Then, with a last glance at Emma, he added, "Sleep well. You're safe now." As I carried my drowsy daughter back to the guest room, I couldn't shake the feeling that in escaping one desperate situation, I might have walked directly into another kind of danger entirely, one far more seductive and complex than mere homelessness. In the bedroom, I laid Emma in the crib, watching as she quickly drifted back to sleep, untroubled by the strange surroundings or the stranger who had taken us in. I envied her innocent trust, her ability to simply accept comfort without questioning its source or price. Because despite Alessio's assurances, despite the food and shelter he'd provided, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Nothing in Alessio Moretti's world came without cost, and sooner or later he would expect payment for his generosity. The question was, what currency would he demand? I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, momentarily disoriented until memories of the previous night flooded back. The luxury penthouse, the mysterious Alessio Moretti, the rain and desperation that had led me to accept his help. A quick glance at the crib confirmed Emma was still sleeping peacefully. The digital clock on the nightstand read 8:17 a.m., the longest stretch of uninterrupted sleep we'd had in days. I slipped out of bed and padded to the window, drawing back the curtains to reveal a transformed Boston. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp autumn day, the city glistening in the morning light. I used the bathroom, then checked my phone out of habit before remembering it had died yesterday. To my surprise, a new smartphone sat on the dresser, still in its box, alongside a charger that fit my old device. Another of Alessio's unexplained provisions. The new phone was already activated, with only one contact pre-programmed: Alessio. The implications of this, that he expected me to call him, that he wanted a direct line to me, sent a shiver down my spine. Emma stirred in her crib, making the soft cooing sounds that signaled she was waking up. I lifted her, breathing in her sweet baby scent, and changed her diaper using the supplies from my backpack. Her blue eyes, so like mine, regarded me with trust that made my heart ache. What kind of mother was I, accepting shelter from a man who was essentially a stranger, a desperate one? I whispered to myself, answering my own unspoken question. After dressing Emma in her last clean outfit, I ventured out of the bedroom. The penthouse was quiet, sunlight pouring through the massive windows and illuminating the space in a way the rainy night had concealed. Art that I had barely noticed the night before revealed itself to be original pieces. I recognized a small Picasso sketch and what looked like an authentic Modigliani. In the kitchen, I found a note on the counter, written in elegant script. Lily, business requires my attention this morning. Make yourself at home. A car will collect you at 11 a.m. to join me for lunch. I will provide for Emma's needs while we talk. A.M. The presumption that I would simply agree to this plan rankled, but I was in no position to refuse. Besides, I was curious about this man who had swept into our lives so dramatically. The refrigerator was fully stocked, and I found everything needed to prepare breakfast for myself and some pureed fruit for Emma. As we ate in the sunlit kitchen, I took stock of our situation. We had shelter, at least temporarily, food, safety. But at what cost? And for how long? The luxury surrounding us was seductive in its comfort, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something dangerous, something that would demand more of me than I was prepared to give. After breakfast, I explored the penthouse more thoroughly, Emma balanced on my hip. The space was even larger than I'd realized, with a home office, a media room, a small gym, and several additional bedrooms. Everything spoke of wealth and taste, but there was a sterile quality to it all, like a high-end hotel rather than a home. No personal photographs, no mementos, nothing that revealed the man behind the luxury. In the office, bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes in multiple languages. Business texts, political biographies, classic literature, all leather-bound and pristine. The desk was immaculate, containing only a laptop, password-protected, I discovered upon trying it, a leather blotter, and a single framed photograph. I picked it up, curious about this lone personal item. The photo showed a younger Alessio, perhaps in his 20s, standing beside an older man with the same striking features and commanding presence. Between them was a beautiful dark-haired woman, her arms linked with both men, her smile radiant. Family, clearly. Perhaps his parents. They stood in front of a villa overlooking what looked like the Italian countryside, wealth and connection evident in their bearing. "You shouldn't be in here," I startled at the voice, nearly dropping the frame. Marco, Alessio's driver and apparent bodyguard, stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, replacing the photograph. "I was just exploring." Marco's gaze moved from me to Emma, then back to me. "Mr. Moretti values his privacy," he said, the warning clear in his tone. "The car will be ready in 30 minutes. I suggest you prepare yourself and the child." He turned to leave, then paused. "There are additional clothes for both of you in the master closet. Mr. Moretti had them delivered this morning." With that, he left, his footsteps silent on the hardwood floors. The encounter left me unsettled, the brief glimpse into Alessio's world, and the clear boundaries around it, a stark reminder of my precarious position as an uninvited guest. I returned to our room and found that indeed, several shopping bags had been placed on the bed. They contained outfits for both Emma and me, daywear, not the lounge clothes I'd been provided the night before. For Emma, there were adorable dresses, tiny leggings, and a warm coat with matching hat, all from high-end children's boutiques. For me, designer jeans, cashmere sweaters, and a camel coat that probably cost more than 3 months' rent at my former apartment. Everything was exactly our size, everything was perfect, and everything felt like a collar being fastened around my neck. Still, what choice did I have? I dressed Emma in a sweet pink dress with matching cardigan, then pulled on the jeans and a soft cream sweater for myself. The mirror reflected back a version of us that looked like we belonged in this world of wealth and power, like we'd never spent last night huddled in the rain with nowhere to go. At precisely 11 Marco knocked on the bedroom door to escort us downstairs. The same black car from last night waited in the parking garage, this time with a car seat installed for Emma. Another provision that raised questions about Alessio's intentions and resources. "Where are we going?" I asked as Marco secured Emma in the car seat with surprising competence. "Mr. Moretti is at La Terrazza," he replied, naming what I knew to be one of the most exclusive restaurants in Boston. "It's a private dining room." Of course it was. The drive took us through the upscale Back Bay neighborhood, past boutiques and cafes where well-dressed people enjoyed the sunny autumn day. A world away from where I'd been just 24 hours ago, I gazed out the window, one hand resting protectively on Emma's car seat, wondering how my life had taken such a dramatic turn. La Terrazza occupied the top floor of a historic building, its entrance marked only by a discreet brass plaque. Marco drove into a private underground garage where an attendant was waiting specifically for us. He helped me out while Marco gathered Emma, then led us to a private elevator. "Mr. Moretti is expecting you," the attendant said, pressing a keycard to the elevator panel. Top floor. The elevator opened directly into a stunning space, a glass-enclosed restaurant with panoramic views of Boston Harbor. At this hour, the restaurant was nearly empty, save for a few tables occupied by what were clearly business meetings. And in the far corner, at a table positioned for optimal privacy, while still commanding the best view, sat Alessio. He rose as we approached, his dark eyes taking in our appearance with unmistakable approval. Today he wore a different suit, charcoal gray and impeccably tailored, with a deep blue tie that brought out hidden depths in his eyes. Once again I was struck by his commanding presence, the way he occupied space as if he owned it. Which, for all I knew, he might. "Lily," he greeted me, taking my hand and brushing his lips against my knuckles in a gesture so old-world and unexpected that I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "You look lovely." His gaze moved to Emma, who was being carried by Marco. A smile softened his features, transforming his face in a way that made my breath catch. "And the little princess as well." He gestured to Marco, who transferred Emma to a high chair that had been prepared at our table, complete with toys that hadn't been there a moment before. Then, with a nod from Alessio, both Marco and the attendant disappeared, leaving us alone at the table. "I trust you slept well?" Alessio asked, holding my chair as I sat. "Yes, thank you," I replied, still off balance from the formality of the situation. "The apartment is incredible." "It serves its purpose," he said dismissively, taking his own seat. "Though it lacks the warmth of a true home." A server appeared with water and menus, then vanished just as quickly, clearly trained to anticipate Alessio's needs without intrusion. "I took the liberty of ordering for us," Alessio continued, setting aside his menu without opening it. "I hope you don't mind. The chef here excels at seasonal specialties." Another decision made for me. I was beginning to see a pattern. "Mr. Moretti." "Alessio," he corrected, his gaze holding mine. "Please." "Alessio," I amended. "I appreciate everything you've done for us. The clothes, the shelter, this meal, but I don't understand why. What do you want from me?" He studied me for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "Direct," he finally said, a note of approval in his voice. "I appreciate that, Lily." He reached across the table, his fingers lightly touching the back of my hand. The contact sent an unexpected current up my arm. "What I want," he said softly, "is to help you and Emma." "Why?" I pressed, not withdrawing my hand despite the unsettling effect of his touch. "You don't know us. We're nothing to you." Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of emotion quickly concealed. "Perhaps I saw something in you," he said. "A strength, a dignity, even in desperate circumstances." His gaze moved to Emma, who was happily gumming a soft toy. "And perhaps I have a particular disdain for men who abandon their responsibilities." Before I could respond, the server returned with our first course, a delicate soup that smelled of autumn vegetables and herbs. As we ate, Alessio skillfully directed the conversation away from his motivations, instead asking about me, where I was from, a small town outside Portland, Maine, my education, nursing school completed just before I became pregnant. My family, estranged since my decision to keep the baby. He listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions and remembering details in a way that made me feel seen. It had been so long since anyone had truly paid attention to me, not as a mother, not as a girlfriend, but as Lily. By the time dessert arrived, I had shared more of myself than I'd intended, while learning almost nothing about him in return. He deflected personal questions with practiced ease, always turning the conversation back to me or Emma. "You haven't touched your tiramisu," he observed, nodding toward my untouched dessert. "Not to your taste?" "No, it's not that," I said, finally gathering the courage to ask what had been on my mind throughout the meal. "I need to know what happens next. This..." I gestured around us, at the luxury, the clothes, the food. "Can't continue indefinitely. I need to find work, an apartment. I need to stand on my own feet again." Alessio set down his espresso cup, his expression turning serious. "I have a proposition for you, Lily." The word sent a chill through me. "What kind of proposition?" "A mutually beneficial arrangement," he said carefully. "I have a house on the North Shore, 8 bedrooms, private beach access, full staff. It sits empty most of the time, which is wasteful." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm offering you and Emma a place there. You would have your own wing, complete privacy, a nursery for Emma. In return, you would act as the house manager, overseeing the staff and ensuring everything runs smoothly when I'm in residence." I stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. "You want me to be your housekeeper?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "A house manager is several steps above a housekeeper, Lily. You would have staff reporting to you, a substantial salary, health insurance for both you and Emma, and a chance to rebuild your life in safety and comfort." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "And what else would you expect from this arrangement?" I asked bluntly. His eyes darkened, understanding my implication immediately. "Nothing you aren't willing to give," he replied, his voice low. "I'm not offering charity, Lily. I'm offering opportunity. What develops between us beyond that? Well, that would be up to you." The drive to the North Shore estate took just under an hour, following winding coastal roads that revealed glimpses of the Atlantic between old-growth trees blazing with autumn colors. Emma had fallen asleep shortly after we left Boston, lulled by the car's motion and a full stomach. I sat in silence beside Alessio, still processing his proposition and my own shocking decision to accept it. "You're quiet," he observed, his gaze on the passing scenery. "I'm trying to understand why I said yes," I admitted, watching the play of sunlight through the trees. "Everything is happening so fast." "Sometimes life changes in an instant," he replied. His hand rested on the seat between us, close but not touching mine. "One moment. One decision can alter everything that follows." I thought about the moment I'd decided to get into his car last night, the desperation that had driven me to trust a stranger. "I don't have much choice," I said softly. His eyes turned to me then, sharp and assessing. "Everyone has choices, Lily. You chose your daughter over an easier path when you decided to keep her. You chose her well-being over your pride when you accepted my help." A pause. "These aren't the actions of someone without choices. They're the actions of someone with priorities." Before I could respond, the car turned between imposing stone gates, a discreet security camera tracking our movement. We followed a long, curved driveway bordered by manicured gardens, autumn flowers still in bloom despite the season's advance, and then the house came into view, and I couldn't suppress a gasp. House was an understatement. The structure before us was a mansion in the classic New England style, 3 stories of weathered gray stone and white trim, with multiple gables and a sweeping front porch. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the afternoon sunlight, and ivy climbed portions of the facade, its leaves turning scarlet with the season. "This is yours?" I asked, knowing the answer but still struggling to reconcile this display of wealth with the man beside me. "One of my properties," Alessio replied, a hint of something like self-consciousness in his tone. "The staff has been preparing for your arrival." We pulled up to the front entrance, where a small group awaited us, an older woman in a housekeeper's uniform, a middle-aged man in a suit, and 2 younger staff members. They stood at respectful attention as Marco opened Alessio's door, then came around for mine. I lifted Emma carefully, trying not to wake her as I emerged from the car. The ocean air was brisk, carrying the scent of salt and pine. "Mrs. Sullivan," Alessio greeted the older woman, who stepped forward with a small bow of her head. "This is Ms. Bennett and her daughter Emma. They will be joining us as I discussed." "Welcome, Ms. Bennett," Mrs. Sullivan said warmly, her Irish accent soft but distinct. "We've prepared the East Wing as Mr. Moretti instructed. Thank you," I managed, feeling overwhelmed by the formality and the implications of staff being prepared for us. How long had Alessio been planning this? Had he somehow engineered our meeting in the rain? Or was it truly the chance encounter he'd presented it as? "This is Mr. Hayes, the groundskeeper," Alessio continued, introducing the middle-aged man, "and Sarah and Thomas, who assist with household duties." Each nodded respectfully, their eyes curious but carefully neutral as they regarded Emma and me. "Mrs. Sullivan will show you to your rooms," Alessio said. "I have some business to attend to in my study." He turned to me, his voice lowering slightly. "Join me for dinner at 7? We can discuss the details of your position then." It wasn't really a question, despite its phrasing. I nodded, and he surprised me by leaning in to place a light kiss on my cheek, his hand briefly touching the small of my back. That same proprietary gesture from the night before. It felt like a statement to the staff, a marking of territory that sent warmth spreading across my skin. Without another word, he disappeared into the house, leaving me with Mrs. Sullivan and my sleeping daughter. "If you'll follow me, Ms. Bennett," the housekeeper said, gesturing toward the entrance. The interior of the house matched its exterior grandeur, soaring ceilings, hardwood floors gleaming with polish, and tasteful antique furniture mixed with modern pieces. We passed through a grand foyer, down a hallway lined with landscape paintings, and into what Mrs. Sullivan called the East Wing. "Mr. Moretti had these rooms renovated last year, but they've hardly been used," she explained, as she opened double doors to reveal a suite that took my breath away. A sitting room with comfortable furniture in shades of blue and cream led to a spacious bedroom with a 4-poster bed. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a private garden, and beyond it, the ocean. A bathroom larger than my entire former apartment featured a clawfoot tub and a separate shower enclosure, and connected to the bedroom was a nursery, clearly just completed, with a beautiful wooden crib, changing table, rocking chair, and walls painted a soft yellow. "Mr. Moretti had the nursery expedited when he called this morning," Mrs. Sullivan said, noticing my shock as I took in the perfectly appointed space. "The painters just finished a few hours ago, but we've been assured the low VOC paint is safe for the baby." I laid Emma gently in the crib, my mind racing. This went far beyond a simple job offer or temporary shelter. The detail, the expense, the speed with which it had all been arranged. It spoke of something more intentional, more consuming than Alessio had admitted at lunch. "How long have you worked for Mr. Moretti?" I asked, turning to Mrs. Sullivan. "Going on 15 years now," she replied, pride evident in her voice. "Since he first acquired this property." "And what kind of employer is he?" Mrs. Sullivan's expression was carefully neutral. "Mr. Moretti is fair but demanding. He values loyalty and discretion above all." She paused, then added, "He's a powerful man, Ms. Bennett, with many business interests." The way she said business interests carried a weight that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. "What kind of business exactly?" I pressed. "I believe that's a question better directed to Mr. Moretti himself," she replied smoothly. "Now, shall I have a light meal sent up for you? You must be tired from the journey, and you'll want to rest before dinner." I recognized the deflection for what it was, and didn't push further. "Yes, thank you. That would be nice." After Mrs. Sullivan left, I sat in the rocking chair beside Emma's crib, watching her sleep peacefully in this new, luxurious environment. So different from where we'd been just 24 hours ago. The speed of the change was dizzying, like being caught in a current too strong to fight. What did I really know about Alessio Moretti? He was wealthy, powerful, used to commanding obedience. He had staff who seemed both respectful and slightly afraid of him. He could arrange for an entire nursery to be completed in hours, and he had taken one look at a homeless woman and her baby in the rain and decided to bring them into his world. Why? The question haunted me as I unpacked the few belongings from my backpack, placing them in the expansive closet already filled with new clothes for both Emma and me. It haunted me as I showered in the luxurious bathroom, using products that probably cost more than a week's salary from my old nursing job. It haunted me as I dressed for dinner in a simple black dress I found hanging in the closet, my size, my style, but far more expensive than anything I'd ever owned. By the time a soft knock at the door announced it was 7:15, I had formulated a plan. I would accept Alessio's offer of employment. I had little choice with winter approaching and no resources of my own, but I would maintain boundaries. I would save money, and I would watch and learn until I understood exactly what kind of man had swept into our lives with such calculated generosity. Sarah, the young woman from the welcoming committee, had been assigned as Emma's nanny for the evening. She arrived with impeccable references and a warm smile, immediately putting me at ease, despite my natural reluctance to leave my daughter with a stranger. "Mr. Moretti is waiting in the library, Ms. Bennett," she informed me after I'd given her detailed instructions about Emma's routine. "Thomas will show you the way." The young man in question stood respectfully in the hallway, ready to guide me through the labyrinthine house. We walked in silence through corridors lined with artwork and antiques, eventually reaching a set of mahogany doors. Thomas knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for a response. "Ms. Bennett, sir," he announced, then stepped aside to let me enter. The library was breathtaking. 2 stories of bookshelves accessed by a rolling ladder, a massive stone fireplace where flames crackled against the evening chill, and leather furniture that looked both expensive and well-used. Alessio stood by one of the tall windows, a glass of wine in his hand, silhouetted against the twilight sky. He turned as I entered, and something flickered across his features, a momentary break in his composed expression that might have been appreciation or something deeper. He had changed for dinner into dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that softened his usual formal appearance without diminishing his aura of authority. "Lily," he said, setting down his glass and crossing to where I stood. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," I replied, fighting the warmth that threatened to color my cheeks. "This house is remarkable. It was my first major purchase in America," he said, gesturing for me to sit on one of the leather sofas, a statement of intent, I suppose. He poured a glass of red wine from a decanter on a side table and offered it to me. I accepted, taking a small sip. It was rich and complex, clearly expensive. "Intent to do what?" I asked, watching him over the rim of my glass. He smiled slightly. "To build something lasting, something meaningful." He sat across from me, his posture relaxed but still somehow commanding the space. "Which brings us to you, and your position here." I straightened, reminding myself this was a job interview, despite the unusual circumstances and setting. "Yes. You mentioned a house manager role?" "Indeed." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying me with those dark, perceptive eyes. "The staff here is small but efficient. Mrs. Sullivan oversees the domestic arrangements. Hayes manages the grounds and security, and there are a few others who come in as needed. What they lack is coordination, especially when I'm in residence, which is increasingly frequent." "And you think I can provide that coordination?" I asked skeptically. "I don't have experience managing household staff." "You were a nurse," he countered. "You understand systems, procedures, the importance of attention to detail. And you have something more valuable than experience: intelligence and adaptability." He smiled slightly. "I saw how you assessed the situation last night, weighed your options, made a calculated decision despite your fear. The reminder of our first meeting, of my desperation and vulnerability, brought heat to my cheeks. I didn't have many options. Everyone has options, Lily," he repeated his earlier words, his gaze intensifying. "You chose the one that would best protect your daughter. That kind of clear-sighted decision-making is exactly what I need." He reached into a drawer in the side table and withdrew a folder, which he placed on the coffee table between us. Your employment contract, he explained. Salary, benefits, expectations, all detailed. I think you'll find the terms generous. I opened the folder, my eyes widening at the figure listed as my monthly salary. It was more than triple what I'd made as a nurse. This is... I trailed off, scanning the rest of the document. Health insurance for both Emma and me. A car for my personal use, a savings account established for Emma's education. Fair compensation for the role, Alessio said simply. And before you ask, no. There are no expectations beyond what's outlined there. His eyes held mine. What develops between us personally is separate from your professional position. One doesn't depend on the other. I wanted to believe him. The salary alone would allow me to save enough to start over independently within months, to give Emma the security I'd failed to provide so far. Why me? I asked again, the question that had been burning in my mind since last night. Of all the people you could hire, why someone you found on the street with a baby? Alessio was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he rose and walked to the fireplace, his back to me as he spoke. Perhaps I recognized something in you, he said finally. A reflection of my own past. Your past? I echoed, setting the contract aside and focusing on Alessio's rigid posture by the fireplace. In the flickering light, shadows played across his features, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. He turned, his expression carefully composed once more. Another time, perhaps. Tonight is about your future. He gestured toward the dining room adjoining the library. Shall we eat while we discuss the details? The deflection was obvious, but I let it pass, following him to an elegantly set table where 2 places had been arranged at one end of a surface that could have seated 20. Crystal glinted in the soft lighting, and fresh flowers scented the air. As we settled into our seats, Thomas appeared silently to serve the first course, a delicate seafood appetizer that tasted of the ocean just beyond the windows. Throughout the meal, Alessio asked questions about my nursing career, my education, drawing me out with genuine interest. He was charming, articulate, and completely focused on me in a way that was both flattering and disarming. It wasn't until dessert was served, a rich chocolate torte that melted on my tongue, that I decided to press him again. You still haven't really answered my question, I said, setting down my fork, about why you're doing all this. Alessio studied me for a moment, then nodded slightly, as if coming to a decision. Come with me, he said, rising from the table. There's something I want to show you. He led me from the dining room, through corridors I hadn't yet seen, until we reached a smaller, more intimate room at the back of the house. Unlike the grand, somewhat impersonal spaces I'd seen so far, this room felt lived in. A leather chair showed signs of regular use. Books were stacked on side tables, and the walls were covered with photographs. The only truly personal space I'd encountered in Alessio's world. He went to a cabinet and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, handing one to me before gesturing toward the photographs. My family, he explained simply. I moved closer, examining the images. Many featured the same people I'd seen in the photo in his office, the older man with Alessio's features, the beautiful dark-haired woman. There were others too, a younger man who resembled Alessio, children playing in an Italian garden, family gatherings around laden tables. Your parents? I asked, indicating the couple who appeared most frequently. Yes, he moved to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. My father built our family business from nothing after immigrating to America. My mother was the heart of our home. The past tense wasn't lost on me. They're gone? My father died 5 years ago. My mother followed 6 months later. A muscle tightened in his jaw. She couldn't bear to live without him. I'm sorry, I said softly, understanding now the reverence with which he'd spoken of family the night before. They had a great love story, he continued, his voice low. An arranged marriage that became a passionate partnership. They were inseparable for 40 years. I sipped the drink he'd given me, an aged whiskey that burned pleasantly, and studied a photograph of a younger Alessio, perhaps 18 or 19, standing proudly beside his father outside a restaurant. Our first legitimate business in Boston, Alessio explained, following my gaze. La terrazza. The word caught my attention. Legitimate? A slight smile curved his lips. You're very perceptive, Lily. He moved to the leather chair and sat, gesturing for me to take the seat opposite him. What do you think I do for a living? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. I think there's more to your business interests than importing clothing and owning restaurants. He nodded, unsurprised by my assessment. My father came to this country with nothing, fleeing poverty in Sicily. He found work where he could, much of it outside the law, protection services, primarily, ensuring businesses in certain neighborhoods operated safely. My pulse quickened as the implications became clear. He was in the mafia, I said bluntly. That's a term from movies, Alessio replied, though he didn't deny it. He was a businessman who created opportunities where none existed for immigrants like himself. As the family prospered, he moved into more conventional enterprises, restaurants, real estate, import-export. He took a sip of his whiskey, his dark eyes watching me over the rim of his glass. By the time I joined the business, much of it was legitimate. I've continued that transformation. But not all of it, I pressed, needing to understand exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. Not all, he acknowledged. Some of our interests still operate in gray areas, but I have one rule, Lily, that has never been broken. We don't deal in drugs, weapons, or people. Ever. I absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with the man before me, the one who had rescued Emma and me from the rain, who had created a nursery in ours, who spoke of his parents with such tenderness. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Because if you're going to be part of this household, you should know who I am. His gaze was steady, unapologetic, and because it explains why I stopped that night, when I saw you in the rain. He leaned forward, his expression softening slightly. My mother was 16 when she arrived in America. Alone, pregnant with my brother, abandoned by the boy who'd promised to marry her. My father found her huddled in the doorway of his restaurant during a winter storm. Understanding began to dawn. Like me and Emma, the parallel was striking, he admitted. My father gave her shelter, protection. Eventually, love. They married when my brother was 3 months old. He gestured around us at the photographs, the evidence of a family built from that initial act of kindness. This was the result. So I'm... what? A chance to honor your father's memory? The idea was both touching and slightly unsettling. Perhaps, he acknowledged. Or perhaps I recognized in you the same strength my mother showed, the determination to protect her child at any cost. He set down his glass and leaned closer, his gaze intense. Whatever the reason, I want you here, Lily. You and Emma. The admission hung in the air between us, laden with meanings I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. I looked away, focusing instead on a photograph of a young boy, Alessio as a child, I presumed, sitting on his father's shoulders at what looked like a carnival. Your brother, I said, changing the subject slightly. Is he involved in the business too? A shadow crossed Alessio's face. Antonio died 10 years ago. A rival organization. It was... messy. I couldn't suppress a shiver at the cold anger that entered his voice, a reminder of the dangerous world that existed beneath the veneer of luxury surrounding us. That's why security is so tight here, I realized aloud. The cameras, the gates, yes. He didn't elaborate, but his expression told me enough. The danger was real, ongoing. I thought of Emma, sleeping peacefully in her new nursery, and felt a stab of anxiety. Would we, Emma and I, be in danger if we stayed? Alessio's expression hardened. No one who values their life would dare touch what belongs to me, he said, the words carrying a possessive weight that both alarmed and, confusingly, thrilled me. Then, more gently, you would be under my protection, Lily, you and Emma both. No harm would come to you here. I believed him. Whatever else Alessio Moretti might be, criminal, businessman, enigma, I believed he would protect us. The question was whether I wanted, whether I could afford, to be under any man's protection again, after Ryan's betrayal had left us homeless. I should check on Emma, I said, setting down my glass and rising. Alessio stood as well, close enough now that I had to tilt my head to meet his gaze. And the position? My offer? I thought of the contract waiting in the library, the security it represented for Emma, the chance to rebuild our lives in safety and comfort. I'll take it, I said finally. But on one condition. His eyebrow rose slightly. Which is? Complete honesty between us, I said firmly. No secrets, no half-truths. If I'm going to be part of this household, I need to know what I'm walking into. For a moment, he looked surprised by my boldness. Then a slow smile spread across his face, genuine, and warming his eyes in a way I hadn't seen before. Agreed, he said, extending his hand as if to seal a business deal. I placed my hand in his, but instead of shaking it, he raised it to his lips, placing a kiss on my knuckles that lingered just a moment too long to be merely polite. Welcome to the family, Lily Bennett, he said softly. 3 months later, I stood at the window of the nursery, watching snow fall gently over the gardens and the ocean beyond. Emma, now 9 months old, played happily on a plush rug nearby, babbling to herself as she explored a new toy, a gift from Alessio, who seemed to return from every business trip with something for her. The transition had been smoother than I'd expected. My duties as house manager came naturally to me, and the staff had accepted my authority with a respect that I suspected had more to do with Alessio's obvious regard for me than my own credentials, and Alessio. That was the most surprising development of all. True to his word, he had maintained a professional distance at first, allowing me space to settle into my role and establish a routine with Emma. But over dinners, quiet evenings in the library, and long walks along the private beach, something had begun to shift between us, a connection that went beyond employer and employee, beyond rescuer and rescued. I learned that beneath his controlled exterior was a man of deep passions and contradictions. Ruthless in business but gentle with Emma. Commanding with his subordinates but patient with me when I made mistakes. A man who could order violence without blinking, but who read poetry in 3 languages and played the piano when he thought no one was listening. Last night, things had finally changed between us. After putting Emma to bed, I'd found him in the library, a fire crackling in the hearth despite the modern heating system, one of his few indulgences. He'd been looking at old family photographs, a glass of whiskey in his hand, lost in memories. I'd joined him, as had become our custom, and he'd told me stories of his childhood, of his father's struggles and triumphs, of his mother's unwavering faith in the man she'd married. And then, in a moment of unguarded emotion, he'd confessed what I'd begun to suspect. "I'm falling in love with you, Lily," he'd said, his voice rough with feeling. "With both of you." Instead of fear or hesitation, I'd felt only a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. When he'd finally kissed me, it was with a tenderness that belied his powerful exterior, his hands cupping my face as if I were something precious, irreplaceable. Now, as I watched the snow transform the landscape into a winter wonderland, I felt his presence before I heard him. That awareness that had grown between us over the months. "She's getting bigger every day," Alessio observed, coming to stand beside me at the window, his gaze on Emma. "Children do that," I replied with a smile, leaning into him slightly when his arm slipped around my waist. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low and intimate. "This house has many rooms, but only one master suite." I turned to look at him, taking in the question in his eyes, and the vulnerability behind it, so rarely visible in this man who controlled so much of the world around him. "Are you asking me to move into your room, Mr. Moretti?" I teased gently. "I'm asking for more than that," he replied, serious despite my lightness. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "I'm asking you to build a family with me, Lily. The kind my parents had. A partnership. A legacy." He opened the box to reveal a ring that took my breath away, an emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the winter light streaming through the windows. "My mother's," he explained, watching my expression. "My father gave it to her the day my brother was born, the day he made her his wife." My heart pounded as I looked from the ring to his face, seeing in his eyes all the complexities of the man I'd come to know, the darkness and the light, the power and the tenderness. "Emma needs a father," he continued when I didn't immediately respond. "A real one. Not a boy who runs at the first sign of responsibility, but a man who will protect her, provide for her, love her as his own. He took my hand. And I need you. Both of you. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering all traces of what had come before. Inside, Emma laughed as she discovered she could stack her blocks into a precarious tower. And I found myself at another crossroads. Another moment where one decision would alter everything that followed. But this time, it wasn't desperation driving my choice. Yes, I said simply, watching as his expression transformed with a joy I'd never seen there before. As he slipped the ring onto my finger. A perfect fit, as I'd come to expect from this man who arranged the world to his liking. I knew that what had begun in the rain that desperate night had led us somewhere neither of us could have predicted. From losing everything but hope to finding a family neither of us had expected to build, our story was just beginning.